Welcome to Gym and Kitchen. I am your host, Shona. Gym and Kitchen's focus is on creating a healthy lifestyle, and I am passionate about educating and coaching real people with busy lives on all things health and wellness related, including the habits and beliefs that govern our food and fitness choices. And that's what this show is all about. You can find Gym and Kitchen on the web, Facebook and Instagram at gymandkitchen.biz. Gym and Kitchen is produced bi-weekly and airs every second Thursday on YouTube. Thanks for watching. This week is really exciting for me because today I'm doing the first, but certainly not the last interview on this show. Today I will be interviewing Lesley Quinlan about life as a triathlete. Lesley is a competitive triathlete and has been doing triathlons for longer than I have known her, which is almost 15 years. She serves in the Canadian Armed Forces Army Reserve. She currently holds the rank of Major, and she is a participant in the Canadian Armed Forces Triathlon program. In 2018, Lesley was named the Military Personnel Command Female Athlete of the Year, and in 2019, she was named the Canadian Armed Forces Female Athlete of the Year. Lesley was also the race director of the Canada Army Run from 2020 to 2013, and just recently finished up her tenure in that role following this year's run. Folks, I'm so excited for this interview today. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. Lesley and I had a ton of fun chatting and just talking all things fitness and triathlon related. I am not a triathlon person, so it was very exciting for me as well. I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Lesley, welcome to Gym and Kitchen. Thank you so much for indulging me and agreeing to be on the show.
Thanks for having me.
How's life in England?
London is good. It's really good. It rains off and on a lot. I've been lucky recently to avoid having to go outside when it's raining. I seem to just miss the rain. I can't complain about those sorts of things. We did a Remembrance Day ceremony where we got invited up for a cup of tea before the ceremony started. How civilized. And it was raining while we were upstairs inside the Wellington Tower. I came downstairs, I sat in my seat, and I was all prepared to, in my DU say, oh, I'm going to smell like wet dog in an hour. And it dried up and the drizzle stopped. And I thought, fantastic. And it didn't rain for the rest of the day. So
you're from Vancouver, of course. I've heard people say that it rains less in Vancouver than it does in England, and then they say you think I'm joking. I can't confirm. I've only been to England a couple of times, so you'll have to give me a full report after you've been there for a little bit longer. I'm very curious how your winter experience is going to go. Let's talk about some fitness and some athletic stuff, because you've been a triathlete as long as I've known you, which is close to 15 years.
It's been a while, I guess, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think I was doing the math. I'm like, I think it's been about 15 years I've known you, and you've been doing triathletes ever since I can remember. So when did you start doing triathlons?
The first triathlon that I signed up for and paid to be a part of must have been, I think, 2003. And it was a little baby tiny try in Chilliwack. It was at Harrison Lake. And there's like the pond and the lake. The swim was really short. It was across the pond. And I ran up and I sat down and I put on my socks and my running shoes and I rode a bike that I had rented that was probably way too small for me. And yeah, did a tiny baby try. The next year, I think, was when I finally bought a bike. And so anyways, I did some sprint tries for a few years. I tried to do my first Olympic distance in 2006. I signed up for the Kelowna Apple. My dad had this tiny little camper van, whatever, Vanagon, Volkswagen, something or other. At the time we drove up there, there was a squall storm line over the lake. It poured rain, there was thunder and lightning all over the place. The roads flooded. At the end of the day, they tried to turn it into a duathlon. They had to cancel it. I was sad.
I feel like you're not a racer if you haven't experienced at least one race where the heavens opened up on you at some point. I'm not even a racer, and of the very few 5Ks that I've done, I've definitely had one where everything started out fine and then the heavens just opened up by the end, and the last kilometer was pure misery.
Oh, I had a race like that. It was in the States one time, and it started out, it looked nice, and the swim was all right. During the rain, the winds shifted. And so instead of being into the wind, with the wind, into the wind, with the wind, it started coming from the side, and then it was with the wind, or into the wind, and it started raining just as we got off the bike, which by itself isn't so bad because a rain run isn't terrible. But next thing you know, it's coming sideways, and the whole place was covered with lines of American flags, very patriotic race, but they're all just out in the wind. They were handing out the silver blankets afterwards because there wasn't really anywhere to go that was inside. The expo had all packed up. Everybody was like,
everybody said, screw this, I'm leaving. I'm taking my ball and I'm going home.
Something like that. Yeah. And there was because that was for a military race with the Americans, and there's a civilian race afterwards. And I don't know if they ran all of the civilian race. I kind of forget what happened, to be honest, but it was, there was some special weather.
Yeah, it sounds memorable.
Yeah.
Maybe in a way you want it to be memorable. You mentioned, for the uninitiated, you mentioned a sprint try. What's a sprint try as opposed to a regular triathlon?
Sure. So there are 4 standard recognized distances, the shortest being the sprint. So that's a 750-meter swim, a 20K bike, and a 5K run. So an Olympic distance triathlon, or now what they call standard distance, because I guess they wanted to take Olympic out of the distance reference, is a 1.5 kilometer swim, a 40K bike, and a 10K run. The others are the full and half Ironman. And to be really honest with you, I just don't want to run that far. So I decided a long time ago that I would rather put my energy into trying to be faster at standard distance than finishing a very, very long one.
I feel like I know this already, but I want to hear you say it. Of the 3 sports in the standard triathlon, so the swimming, the running, and the cycling, which one's your favorite?
My favorite is usually the swim, unless the water is really cold. In which case it kind of depends on the course.
Here's a question, because I know I've talked about this with Greg, with my husband, and we wondered, so you've got a daughter now, and she's, how old is she? Remind me.
12 already.
Oh, holy smoke. So you were still training when you were pregnant. And we had a running joke. We wondered if at any point during your pregnancy, if any of us could have swam faster than you could.
Oh,
pregnant. We'll think that probably not. We joke about you being part shark.
There's some old jokes about that go a really long way back. But I mean, in terms of, I guess, triathletes, I'm a good swimmer compared to, to people who are pure swimmers. I'm, reasonable. I don't profess to be, amazing or pro at any one sport. But the thing that multi-sport has taught me is that you will do better overall being good at all 3, as opposed to really great at one and at the other 2. It pays to be consistent. So when I first started, I would have said, yes, swimming is absolutely my favorite, and that's the one that I'm best at. And I would struggle through the bike. It was just painful for me. And then I would just go complete the run. I think over time I got, better at the bike and the run. And I would say I'm reasonably consistent over all 3. I still probably struggle the most in the bike, especially when it's the long flat course and there's wind and it's just consistent power all the time. That's where I can, afford to put in some more work. But yeah, swim would be usually my favorite part of it.
I have so many questions. You answered one of them, which was, which one do you find the most challenging? But how far out from a race do you start any kind of structured training? It's a bit of a loaded question.
It is. So in fairness, my training has varied greatly over the years. From like, well, I'll just kind of do what seems like a good idea and try and put in some more time on each of these. I have sometimes trained with a group and sometimes not. Circa 2015, I decided that, all right, well, I need to, if I'm going to be a bit more serious about this in the context of the military team, I needed to, do something that was more structured in terms of coaching. I hired a coach on the side. That was Sharon Donnelly, who won the Pan Am Games back in, I'm not sure which year, and went to the Olympics the very first time they had triathlon in the Olympics in 2000, and is just a fantastic athlete and a great human. So shout out to Sharon. But so she made the training plan for me, and I said, okay, I can, like I can run somebody else's life, but I can't run my own. So I need to outsource this.
I think you're not alone in that. Most of the best athletes that I know and that I've had the pleasure of knowing, and even personal trainers that I know who have decided that they wanted to do something competitive, even though they know what they can do themselves. If they want to be competitive in something, they hire a coach who's done it before to just have that extra level of insight. And that was going to be one of my questions, but again, you answered it for me. You said, I hired a coach.
Well, and some of it is because, when the hard workouts are required, it's easier for me to say, okay, well, I'll just tone it down a bit if I've set it out. If, coach is telling me to do it and I'm accountable to somebody else, especially because I'm cheap and I've paid for it, then I feel like I really I feel like I have to do it. Okay, well, and at least there's somebody to kind of air quotes blame it on. Oh, okay, coach says I have to, so I guess I have to, right? If I say I have to, it's easier for me to let myself off the hook sometimes.
From that, do you have any tips for anybody who's considering doing a triathlon? I'm not saying me, because I don't like running enough that I want to do a triathlon probably ever in my life. But I really admire maybe a sprint at some point. Yeah, I actually really like swimming, and I'm remarkably bad at it.
That's just a technique issue, because here's the thing, right? And you hear that from a lot of people who say, well, I'd like to do a triathlon, but I'm not a good swimmer. Okay, well, can you swim at all? Yes, I can swim at all, but I'm not good at it, right? I took some swimming lessons as a kid. I can do front crawl. I'm not very efficient. I'm not very fast. That's a perfectly good place to start from. And the only thing it tells me is that it's a technique issue. Because if you're a reasonable runner and a reasonable cyclist, i.e. you run at all ever, and you can finish, say, a 5K, and you cycle at all ever, and you can complete, that 20K, no matter how fast you do it, right? I'm not here to judge your time. Then it just means that the swimming is a technique issue, because obviously you have the fitness, right? So to those people, I say, if you don't have a friend who's a fairly good swimmer and can give you some pointers and help you out, you can, there's the options of taking sort of adult swimming lessons, or best of all, just go join a master's group. Generally, the requirements for those aren't real high. They want people to be able to, complete 100 meters, for example, right? And they'll help you out from there. So if you find one that's fairly chill, not super competitive, that's willing to help with stroke development. And sometimes they will have a huge range of people. I really enjoyed the club that I swam with in Ottawa, which sadly I do miss them. But there was a big range of people. There were, folks who, struggled with their swimming and were really looking for a lot of stroke development. And there were others who are, had pro cards for half Ironman. So, big difference.
That's really good advice, and something I would never have thought of. Now, as a master's group, is that something that somebody could find with just a Google search within their own city, and just at one of the local pools that they could find a club that is open and saying, please come join us. We'd love to help you out with your swim technique?
Generally speaking, yes. And it does depend on where you live, whether or not, it's easy to get into. That was the one trouble with Ottawa, is that there's not enough pools for the size of the place. All of the kids swimming lessons and the swim clubs have just an iron grip on all of those after school times. So often you will find that they are either in the evening or very early in the morning. And some of them, it's certainly not guaranteed that you could have a place, like you needed to put your name in fairly early, but most places, it's a little easier to get in and have space. But yeah, for sure, Google, swim club, Calgary swim club, Masters swimming. Either Masters swim club, Masters swimming, something to that effect. And you should find something that's accessible.
Are there any kind of online resources that people could also look for if they are looking to get started with triathlons? Are there any good forums or Facebook groups, Instagram groups, whatever else might be out there that's popular? Because you and I are the Facebook/Instagram generation, but I know that the younger generation is more about Snapchat and TikTok and things like that. And I'm sure there are resources on those as well. Any thoughts that come to mind, or any people that you follow that you find have really good advice to offer?
I am probably the worst person to ask about this because I don't actually go looking for those forums online. If you're out there and you're not in that, in that circle already, try a triathlon club in your area, right? The nice thing about triathlon and that community is that it's really quite friendly. And I've found over the years that it's full of people who just want to help folks who, especially those who want to get started. People who are much more competitive are maybe a little bit more like side eye at their competition, right? But that's a whole lot different from helping somebody get into the sport. And I haven't come across anybody, even the sort who will side eye their competition, that wouldn't help out or give information to, or be like, hey, this is what you need to know, to folks who are just trying to get into it. So I think, especially in the, overall, I think triathlon's a very welcoming sort of community and wants people to just get involved and have a good time.
And hopefully that's something that people actually do, is go and look for a triathlon club if that's something they want to. Like I said, this might not be me, at least not right now, but if I decide that I really want to torture myself in that manner, that's where I'll start and see if I can find a triathlon club.
I feel like there's different levels of self-torture in triathlon, right? Like there's the people who go out there just to finish it and they are just happy to be there, and victory for them is crossing the finish line. And that is 1,000% commendable, right? They have done everything more than all the people who just sat on the couch that day. And, it is fun to go out there. My favorite races are the ones that, just have a fun vibe to it, whether that just be, you always want something that's well organized. So that part aside, that, have a good atmosphere, are fun, have, there's a lot to be said for a good playlist and in the transition area or at the finish line, or, wherever you're looping through, that have good community support where people come out and, and cheer for the athletes who are competing. My favorite people at any race, besides obviously, the officials who are putting it on because it's not possible without them, but are really, the volunteers and the people who come out and cheer. And there's that rare race where they put your name on the bib or something, but either way, it doesn't really matter. The people who come out and make the hilarious signs, they're the best.
and kudos and shout out to them for sure.
Yeah, right. Who just come out and support. But yeah, like if you want to be a triathlete, do a little bit of each, practice them. Do yourself a big favor and practice getting off your bike and running. There's
brick training.
Yes. And I mean, we could have a whole other conversation about.
We could spend an hour talking about brick training in itself. So maybe we'll leave that for a second interview.
Whatever makes you happy, right? But I really would suggest that anybody who's just going to try it out, get off your bike, put it down, and then go for a little run. It doesn't have to be a long time. Just get used to the feeling of getting off your bike and then having to put one foot in front of the other. Because, man, I have had more than one race, especially early on, where I biked, harder than I thought I was, maybe. I don't know. You put in a lot of effort. And if you haven't practiced it, you get off and all you can think is, jello legs. And you're not really sure it's like you don't know how to move your legs anymore. It's really quite awkward.
Well, this brings a question up that I obviously don't know the answer to. What's the order of the exercises in a triathlon? And is it always the same? Does it vary? You're nodding, so it tells me it's all the same. What is that order? Which one do you start with? Which one do you finish with?
Triathlon is always swim, bike, run.
Okay.
I think there is the very odd event out there that may actually even be advertised as a reverse triathlon, like a run, bike, swim. I feel like I've heard of that somewhere, which I think would be fun to try. I understand from a safety perspective why it's not the norm, because people often do just put it all out there, right? They try really hard. By the time they get to the end of the run, they're done. And it would be kind of dangerous for that to happen, at the end of your bike and then need to get into particularly open water. So, because you can find triathlons that are pool swims. although most are open water. If you find, if you're in a community that just doesn't have access to open water, you can find some that are pool swims. The first Olympic distance that I actually, standard distance, as we use the right words now, that I ever did, like I said, I tried for it to be the Kelowna Apple. In the end, it was Wassa Lake. And Wassa Lake is in the Kootenays. And it's not like I didn't know better. I did 5 triathlons. I did 5 triathlons that summer. And let me tell you, each one of them was a learning experience.
Did you just say you did 5 triathlons in one summer?
Yes.
Did you sleep during that summer?
Yeah. I mean, they're just one day, right? Like, so, even if it takes you for an Olympic distance, let's say it takes you 3.5 hours, right? I mean, the Olympians are doing them depending on the course. The men are well sub 2 hours. The women are plus or minus 2 hours, right? So if that's high pro level, if it takes you 3.5 hours to complete an Olympic distance, and that's an entire morning, yes, but it's not. What's the cutoff for Ironman? Usually somewhere around 16 hours. Like it's a different game, right?
It sure is a different game. Yeah, it's also a different distance and a different terrain usually.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they're not comparing the same things, right? And I love it when I meet somebody new and they go, "Oh, you do triathlon? That's great. Do you do Ironman then?" I used to say that I would, maybe do one day just to say I did. Now, honestly, I'm not so sure because I don't really want to run a full marathon is kind of what it's about. I had a bunch of had a bunch of troubles last spring, summer, particularly with my back and my legs. So to be really honest and kind of circle back to one of your previous questions about training, I did a whole lot of nothing all summer. And then we found out kind of short notice that we were moving across the world. And I thought, okay, well, as long as I'm staying kind of active-ish, I'm not going to fret about this. And then we will revisit. So only within the last, honestly, like month or two, have I resumed training and have started to try and make sure that, okay, well, at least I'm doing a daily workout of some capacity and not worrying about how hard it is, but build a little bit of volume and build a little bit of base without it being, something that's going to flare up any of that so that I can slide back into it.
This is a good question because as we were chatting beforehand, I've also just gone through sort of some serious burnout and have not done as much training as I would like. What's been your strategy for developing a routine again and getting back into things? And what kind of training do you do? Is it exclusively cardiovascular training? Do you incorporate strength training? Is it a blend of the two? Do you do them both on the same day? Or do you split them up, one type one day and one type another day? That's a whole lot of questions. Answer as you like.
That is all good questions.
All the questions. How do you train? Tell me. I'm so curious.
Yeah. Well, so again, it has depended on the year. I've been with the Forces competitive tri team since a good decade or more now, I guess. And more recently, we've gotten a coach who does give out, workouts and training plans. So more recently, I've started following that again. But especially over the summertime, I didn't do a whole lot. Like I said, I have been in the past not a model citizen where strength training is concerned. And I think it's that and triathletes are terrible for this. And it's a bit of a do as I say, not as I do, I confess. And like I said, I really am trying to get better about this. I did some strength training this past week. I did some leg press and my butt muscle did protest the next day. I felt it, but I was like, all right, well, I did it. That's great. You did a thing. Good for you. But yeah, as triathletes are terrible for, okay, I have to do the cardio. And as soon as you get busy, what's the first thing you drop? You drop the strength training because it takes time and it doesn't immediately feel like you're making progress because your lungs aren't burning or, whatever the case may be, right? Like I'm not winded at the end of it in the same kind of way that you are when you pick up something heavy and put it down repeatedly. So I am.
That just tells me you're not lifting heavy enough, but it's a different modality, because of course you train differently for endurance than you do for strength and power. So that's, and we can have a whole different conversation about it.
And I would love to, because I have some great questions for you about, because I've heard a few different things lately about how, lifting heavier less often is actually probably better than than doing super light more often. And I would love to pick your brain about stuff like that. But
let's park that, and we'll have a round 2 at some point, and we'll talk all things strength, which is of course my wheelhouse, and that's the one that I like best.
No, I like that. That would be helpful. But I'm trying very hard to jump back on the strength bandwagon and do better this year. Awesome. Because there's lots to be said for, being strong enough, right? Like you need the muscle capacity to, endure the hours of training and racing.
The best endurance athletes I know also spend time in the gym doing strength training. They would just approach it differently than I would, because I don't consider myself any kind of an endurance athlete. So, but again, we can have a whole long conversation about that. Fantastic. So you've recently moved to London, England from Ottawa, and anything coming up for races in the future, or are you just trying to get back on the bandwagon right now and remind your body what it's like to move following some injuries and some rehab stuff?
Little column A, little column B.
Okay.
So I've been told that we'll have training camp again in the spring in March. So I need to get my team application in before the middle of December. I think it just came out. And then we've been invited to a race with the Americans in California, which sounds way sexier than it is because the water is so cold. There's lots of people like, oh, it's my favorite race. And I'm like, but how? It's so cold. And I think that one's the end of June. So normally we compete under an umbrella called CISM. It's a French acronym for the International Confederation of Military Sport. And I don't know if anyone is hosting next summer. There was a country on the books, and apparently it's not confirmed. So I actually don't know if that's happening, or if the international race that we'll have this year will be that with the Americans that they use for their selection championships. So TBA on that front. But I know that the UK does have a fairly strong triathlon community. So the hunt is officially on for some kind of club or group to train with, particularly swimming. I find it beneficial to have a group to swim with. Thanks to the glory and advent of Zwift, the ladies from the CAF Tri team, we do have bike rides together sometimes, because you can upload your workout directly from Training Peaks to your Garmin and get that to sync with your power trainer on Zwift. It will actually adjust for you. And if you're meant to do intervals for, 3 minutes hard, 2 minutes off, or whatever the case may be, it will automatically adjust that for you, and it forces you into it, because for the love of pixels, it gives you a little star if you do it right in the correct range, and it will deny you the star if you don't. So
a little bit of external validation right there.
Exactly what I was going to say. The things we do for external validation, right?
Let's take a little bit of a shift and talk about nutrition. I know you and I've talked about nutrition in the past, and of course, the saying is always that you can't outrun a bad diet. Now, do you approach nutrition differently for training, or is it just kind of an all umbrella thing, or is it just I've heard you say just eat real food, which I think is honestly some of the best advice that you can really go with. Like, just stay away from the boxed crap and just eat real food. Any thoughts on that? How do you approach nutrition, generally speaking?
I'm not real complicated about it. I will not profess to be particularly well educated on the subject of nutrition. And, I've seen come and go over the years so many fads. You remember when Atkins was big, and I knew somebody who said, my dad was on this for quite some time and it caused him some damage. It was no good. And I thought to myself, oh, I'm glad I skipped that. For a hot minute, broccoli was the superfood, and then it was blueberries. And I thought, vindication, I love blueberries. Who needs that broccoli anyways? Whether it be, what's the newest one been?
I mean, keto's been all the rage for quite some time, and we could again have a very long conversation about keto, the keto diet, and ketosis, and that could take hours, I'm sure. But keto's been popular. Paleo was popular for a while.
Yes. No, I think I was thinking of keto, and I had I used to get the Triathlon Canada magazines, and I remember reading an article in there about how basically as soon as I read that keto was not good for endurance athletes, I was like, oh, further vindication. Okay, let's just carry on. So when I train a lot, I do put a little bit more focus on trying to make sure I get enough protein to, to rebuild the muscle that you've damaged, micro damaged while you've been running hard, cycling hard, whatever the case may be. But other than that, I try to stick to mostly eating real food. I have go-tos. So for, years running, I was going to swim practice really early Tuesday, Thursday morning. And I used to have I would make myself a little yogurt bowl. So I would put some berries in the bottom, and then I'd have my frozen berries, and I'd just put it in the fridge overnight so they would thaw really. Throw my yogurt on top, put some other things on it, maybe some granola or whatever in the morning, because I didn't like it mushy and all squished together, just personal preference. And that's Yeah, and that's what I would eat on the way to the pool. And then one day I got cold in the winter because Ottawa, and I thought, this is ridiculous. Why am I punishing myself with cold food in a cold environment on the way to a cold pool? Because I don't like being cold, because I'm too skinny for cold winters. And so I made myself an oatmeal bowl. And so I would almost religiously put some kind of frozen berry in the bottom, and then my 4 heaping tablespoons of plain quick oats, a spoon of chia seeds, coconut, cinnamon, and whatever else I felt like, be that raisins or goji berries or whatever I had or didn't have around. And so because I'm lazy and I'm looking for quick solutions, I would just, boil water in the morning, put the lid on it, get the rest of my stuff together, and I would eat half on the way to the pool and half leaving the pool on the way to work. And I did that for a really long time. And I still have oatmeal fairly often, especially since it's kind of dreary in the morning here a lot of the time. I have a friend who says, I eat oatmeal, and she is into Ironmans and really long distance stuff. She says, look, I eat porridge 7 days a week. They got in fact, a rice cooker to make oatmeal in, and her and her husband add different things to it, depending on what they like or what they feel like. Ooh, maple syrup, throw in a dab of maple syrup for me. But circling back, I don't know, I get bored doing this, eating the same thing every single day. So yeah, I try to stick to the real food. I do, because I think you said you were going to ask me about, my nutritional vice. And it's that I have a sweet tooth. I do, will gravitate towards, sweet things or sugary things. I am the weirdo who does not like cucumber or melons of any kind, but fruitcake. Oh, especially if it's got marzipan on top. I really like fruitcake. I know.
Might discuss that. You're the only person I know, I think, other than my stepdad who passed away a few years ago, who actually will admit to liking fruitcake. I found that endurance athletes in particular have, I think, more of a propensity towards the sweet tooth and the sort of the more carby meal. So. And that's because of the nature of the work that you're doing, is that you actually need more of even the simple sugars to keep you going through the endurance. And I know that there's whole forums around race nutrition and race fuel that involve gel fats, and that could be a whole hour-long conversation in itself. And so you have to train your body to take in quick sugar and absorb it while you're on the move, because you're working for so long that you can't balance yourself.
Yeah, so for things like people using gels for training and races and that sort of stuff. And people will say, look, don't try anything new on race day that you haven't tested. And I would say that, yeah, I mean, in general, it is good advice. I have done that before, and thankfully my guts are fairly steely, and that's worked out fine, as long as it's not like really deviating from something that you've done. And I think, again, it depends. Like, are you somebody who's, out there to have a great time and cross the finish line? Or are you taking this really seriously and it's, really competitive for you? And, whether that be whatever your time may be, right? Like if you're putting it all out there and you're really pushing your body, then I think that's a bit different than, all right, I'm just going out for a good time and maybe a longer time than I could.
Right.
So, there's that aspect, but yeah, I mean, there's guys that I train with who have their like the little bento box on their bike, and they'll fill it up with Sour Patch Kids, for example, because they're like, oh, I need my little sugar shot. Yeah, or they'll stop at a gas station and get a Red Bull or a can of Coke, and I'm like, I don't personally do that, but okay, it seems to. You guys are fasting for me, so maybe I'm not doing it right.
It's certainly one strategy. Maybe not one I would recommend, but it is certainly one strategy. I'm going to try the oatmeal though, with all the stuff in it, because that sounds amazing.
I like my loaded oatmeal. And my friend said that I think her husband, she said, puts Greek yogurt in his. And I thought, that is not something I've tried before. I have on rare occasion put a little bit of protein powder in it, usually like vanilla. But I would try that with chocolate as well. Right? Have some like chocolatey oatmeal.
Might be good. I make protein shakes, and I often put quick oats in them, not just uncooked, and they actually hold up pretty well, and it makes a pretty loaded protein shake, so it fills you up, which is of course the point.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned protein too, because I literally just did my last video on this show was about probably not getting enough protein, because it's something that I notice in a lot of people is they're like, why do I have a headache and why am I always tired? And I'm like, you're probably not actually getting enough protein, because you do need a lot of it. And of course, at an athletic level, honestly, you need more. And it's something that people really need to strategize if they're going to do any kind of heavy athletic training, whether it's endurance-based or strength-based.
And I think, really honestly, I realized recently that I've been failing at that a bit. So I've had to try and, bring that back around, because I've said lots of times out loud that I describe myself as a food-centered individual. I'm always, where is my next meal coming from? I never travel without snacks or knowing where I can get snacks. Or
I always like hanging out with you because you do always have food around. You're like, I'm hungry. Anybody wants some food? I'm like, me.
And I was out on a bike ride one time with at training camp. Oh, this was several years ago, and we were on the way back, and I think I was getting kind of snarly. And one of the other ladies, and it became a bit of an infamous story. She just handed me some piece of, I don't know if it was a. You know what? Honestly, I think it was when those like waffles were new. They're really. You know what I'm talking about? Like they started making them as sort of energy gel waffles, but really this originates as a stroopwafel from the Netherlands. And I'm half Dutch, so I've known about them my whole life. Like it never would have occurred to me, however, to take a stroopwafel on a bike ride. But anyway, she hands me something. It's like, here, eat this. And I do. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. Like I am the Snickers commercial, right? So I try not to be without food, because I know that I'm a horrible person when I'm hangry. But
I feel your pain on that one, and I'm a lot better probably the last 10 or 12 years of my life, but occasionally I mismanage it. And I have frequently told the guys that I work with in the military that if I'm suddenly really, really cranky, I say, it's not you, it's me. I've mismanaged my nutrition. Back me into the corner, give me a 10-meter radius, throw the Snickers bar, snag out, and give me 5 minutes. I should be okay once I've devoured the bar.
Something that I like about eggs, for example, right? It's something that I find, if I need a fast walk out the door, something that's going to fill me up that counts as real food, I will very often just, fried egg, piece of toast, go. If I'm feeling fancy, I might even put a slice of cheese on top.
Ooh, or some avocado. Oh, not an avocado fan, huh?
I will eat it in stuff. I will not slice it and put it on something.
If you make guac and do the exact same thing and spread it on the toast and then put the egg on top, it's really good.
Interesting. So, and see, funny, right? Like a good guacamole, I don't mind at all. That's a recent development for me, probably only within the last few years or so. Have I been like, oh, actually, this isn't bad, and I think it needs to have enough lime or something. I'm not sure.
Usually, the magic ingredients for a good guac is just lime and something spicy. So it should have that zing from the lime and the zing from a little bit of hot sauce. And
I'm a spice sissy. I cannot handle my spice.
Just a little bit, like a little dash. Yeah.
Okay.
The next time that you and I are on the same continent, we'll make plans to get together, and I will show you how to make guac. That's like very cool. And I promise you'll be able to eat it, because if I can eat it, anybody can eat it.
Okay, sounds good. You're on.
Lesley, let's wrap up. I have a couple more questions, and then I'll let you get on with your day. But So it's just because I'm not super a gear nerd, but I know lots of people are. I'm that person. Like, I don't have a smartwatch. I use the Runkeeper app only because I did the Canada Army run this year, and it was the one. And I might switch over to using one of the others. I know Strava is very popular with a lot of people, but I'm that person that I actually, like, I don't even want the stats. My body will usually tell me what's going on because the stats sometimes make me feel worse about myself. I do know, however, that they're very popular, and a lot of people really appreciate the analytics and the different gear and the fancy things. Mostly, I am happy if I have a pair of shoes that fits my feet and and a good playlist, and I'm usually happy. But I bit of a minimalist in that respect, and lots of people do appreciate good gear. So any particular gear or any specific supplements that you are absolutely in love with that you cannot live without, that you want to tell people about?
Well, I will be the first to admit that it's not that I'm tech stupid, but I'm tech lazy. If it's difficult to use, if it's difficult to upload, I can handle, a little bit of setup, but if it literally takes more than 5 minutes, I'm probably just not going to bother.
I think you're not alone in that.
Yeah. And I like you say, I think it's a fairly common sentiment. You want to get on with things. I don't want to have to fuss around with it a whole lot before I start training. I want it to be able to connect easily. But at the same time, I do want to have some of the data because I recognize that it's useful. So I'm trying to remember how many years ago it was, because I've had the same bike for a long time. I would really like to go bike shopping. I haven't had the chance yet. And my team bestie got a fancy new bike recently and gave me a little bit of bike.
So you have a little bit of envy going on right now?
I totally do. But given that I've had the same race ride for literally a dozen years, it's not, completely out of line to think that I should upgrade it. But that said, I got a power meter on it several years ago. And I did find that actually I think I got it in 2019 because we raced in China at the World Military Games, and I actually borrowed a Garmin from a friend that was compatible with the power meter because I didn't own such a beast. So my friend Michelle lent me her Garmin, and I used it only for the bike so that I could, and I had it, I think I had it attached. I just put it around the handlebars because I didn't have like the fancy little mount for it or anything like that. So I had it on the bike just for that. And I took the team's now coaches, Coach Dave's advice, and I actually ran that race without a heart rate monitor or anything for the first time, and just went for it because you can, the data is great. It helps you. It tells you, how much. It doesn't let you lie to yourself, I guess, is really what it does and doesn't do. And obviously it does many things for you, but to simplify it, it doesn't let you lie to yourself. And so I took it all off and just went really hard for it. And, that's where my race PB comes from. And I had a fantastic run. Not knowing how fast I was going, just knowing that I had to go as hard as I could. But as far as specific gear is concerned, I do sport a Garmin. I joke that it does just about everything except the workout for me.
Probably not a bad thing.
Right? Mine's the Phoenix 6 Pro. I have the S because I have tiny, skinny little child size wrists, and the S is just for the smaller size. And it has some features that I think are great, right? One of the things I love about it is that I can actually store some music on it, so I can connect my AirPods to the watch and go for a run, have all the data, and not take my phone.
Oh, that is
which is also great if it's raining, because I always try hard not to test that guarantee that it's water resistant for 30 seconds or whatever the heck it is, because I'm certain that whatever protection plan I do or don't have, it's not, they're going to declare it invalid at the first opportunity, right? So yeah, I do, I do like my Garmin. I used to have a Polar. I loved it equally. There's lots of great products out there. So whatever works for you, and it's got the features that you need. It's got the battery life you want. I wouldn't recommend getting something that is massive overkill if you're not going to use all the features. It just becomes a bit of a waste at that point. But it's certainly nice to have some of them. There is sometimes that conflict when you try really hard, and then Garmin is like, maintaining.
This is why I don't use those.
So you have to,
worse about my run than if I
right?
running. This feels really good. And then I look at it and I'm like, oh, I only went that fast. I'm like, obviously I'm doing worse today than I thought I was. So that's exactly why I don't use them. But I know many people really like the stats because it shows the trajectory over time, which of course is the point, is to show you your baseline and then show your baseline improving from there on in to help you, especially if you're doing things like triathlons where you've got endurance training coming into play.
Yeah, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know by saying that, some days it's going to be great and some days you're going to feel terrible, but overall you are still improving, right? Just because you have one bad workout, don't throw out the whole week.
Isn't that the truth, right? We all have great days and we all have terrible days, and ultimately I do this show. I like to learn things from people, and I hope I have interesting things to say as well, but more for anybody who's watching, somebody might get a tip out of it, be like, oh yeah, actually that's a good point. Or they'll hear it from me a million times and they won't listen because I've been their trainer or I'm their friend or their colleague, but they'll hear it from somebody they don't know. They'll be like, oh, but Lesley said that. And she was a triathlete. So now I'm going to do it. I'm like, oh, that's all you actually need. Anyway, Lesley, I want to be respectful of your time because I know it's dinner time in England there. So thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show and have me ask you a whole bunch of questions. I think we definitely have to do a round 2. And
I feel like I could prattle on for a long time about this stuff.
You're supposed to be verbose on a show like this. That's exactly what I want, is you do all the talking and I ask the questions. And I love it. So maybe we'll have a round 2 and we'll have a deeper dive into things like brick training and like really specific nutrition, and we can take a look at things like keto and Atkins and things like that, and what myths you haven't heard. I think that might be a really fun chat for us. But in the meantime, we'll wrap up the interview for now, and we'll have round 2 at a later date.
Sounds brilliant, my friend. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a great one.
You too.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I enjoyed recording it for you. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to share this episode with a friend. Plus, remember to connect with Gym and Kitchen on the web, Instagram, and Facebook at gymandkitchen.biz. There's one more episode coming up before Gym and Kitchen is going to take a little break for Christmas, so stick around because I'm going to have a little bit of fun with it, and I can't wait to see all of you in the next episode.